Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Gilda Evans, bringing you the Autism Resource Podcast. This podcast and the ARP website are your one stop knowledge and resource base for autism and much more. I'm pleased to have Dr. Kate Lund join me as my guest today. Kate is a licensed clinical psychologist, resilience expert, author of several books, and host of the Optimized Mind podcast. With specialized training from 3 Harvard Medical School affiliated hospitals and more than 2 decades of clinical practice, she helps parents, athletes, students, and entrepreneurs thrive within their own unique contexts. Through her writing, speaking, and clinical work, she empowers people to build resilience, manage stress, and unlock their potential. Welcome, Kate, and thanks so much for taking the time to join me and discuss the work that you do.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So, to get us going, you talk a lot in your books and so forth about resilience as something that develops within our own unique context. Can you share what that means and how parents and young people, especially those who identify as neurodivergent, can begin identifying their own context for growth?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And really, we have to be thinking about resilience within our own unique context because it really comes down to how do we optimize? What do we need to be optimal? Our own sense of well-being and all else within our own context. Because if we're always looking outside of our context and comparing ourselves to others to things that might not really be attainable, we're not going to be building that foundation of resilience, that foundation of optimization. And so it's really important for us as parents to understand ourselves and to understand our kids, and to then in turn help our kids to understand themselves so that they can start to move forward in this way, kind of building on their strengths, using their strengths to navigate through and beyond challenge. And obviously, challenges need to be managed, contended with, but we really also want to be focusing on the strengths within our own unique context to help us optimize using those.
Okay, now in your book, Step Away, The Keys to Resilient Parenting, you emphasize that parents need to step back before they can step in effectively. So, what does that look like in day-to-day family life, and how might that differ between what we call a neurodivergent family, neurodiverse family versus a neurotypical family?
Yeah, so the concept is the same across families, might play out a little bit differently, but the general concept is the same. By stepping away, I'm really talking about finding a way to, for us as parents, and for all of us really, because these concepts apply across different domains, to find a way to manage our stress response effectively. Because we want to try to show up as level as possible each and every day. Because if we're showing up in an intensified emotional state and then a challenge hits, boom, probably going to escalate to the point of shutdown. So I teach a very simple technique designed by a physician in Boston in the 1970s called the relaxation response as my go-to on helping people to develop that initial sense of managing their stress response. So super simple. Come up with a word or phrase that they find soothing in some way, and they breathe. 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes later in the day, and they start to integrate what it feels like to be in that level space. And then can carry that around in their back pocket if a stressor comes up with the kids in the family, at work, anywhere really. And they can call that technique up and modulate, give space, step back, gain perspective. And so that type of a thing, this type of a practice is going to be vital regardless of the family context, right? If it's a neurodivergent family, a neurotypical family, stressors are going to come up for both families. Perhaps in either case, the stressors might be more intense, they might be more pronounced, more frequent, but still want to be practicing this type of a technique as a foundation to build that resilience so that you can manage through those challenging moments that come up. And then from there, it's knowing ourselves as parents. What do we need within our own context to be at our best, to have an optimized sense of well-being? And how can we help our kids in a developmentally appropriate way understand the same about themselves so that we can help them start to build in the pieces that are going to help them be optimal in their context, whether that context is one of a child living with neurodivergence or perhaps it's a neurotypical kid. Same principles apply, just might show up a little bit differently.
Okay, and the technique that you described sounds fairly simple, but then very often it's the simple things that work for us the best.
100%.
Yeah.
It's so simple. The one thing is folks need to practice it consistently. Sometimes I'll explain it to people and they're like, yeah, it's really easy, really easy. And then they try it like once and it doesn't work and they throw it out. But really, it's about consistent practice across time that really starts to make the difference. And the cool thing is, it's a simple technique. You can start teaching it to very young kids, like elementary school age.
Yeah, and you have worked with everyone from young athletes to high performing professionals, right? And consistency is good, but sometimes it's hard for a lot of us to attain. So, what are some of the most common mindset traps that you see and that would prohibit people from being consistent about that sort of thing? And how can people reframe them?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's folks are barraged by a lot of different inputs these days, and we're oftentimes moving through life at warp speed. And so it's easy to hit a wall, so to speak, and I don't have time to add anything else. I can't do this thing that's going to supposedly help me to unlock some potential or some a sense of well-being and all of that. And so it's helping folks to start with one small step to shift their lens to help them see what could be possible in terms of optimizing their well-being. And oftentimes it does start with practicing this relaxation response, and they can start with 2 minutes at a time. It doesn't have to be five. We can even start with 1 minute, and then to really track those small changes that they're making, really powerful. The other thing is sitting down at the end of each day and jotting down 3 to 5 things that went well on that day can be very powerful, because oftentimes we get stuck in that zone of all the things that didn't go well, all the challenges that came up, all the things I should have done differently, or I responded the wrong way in this certain situation. But inevitably, there are things that did go well. And if we intentionally make note of those, that is very powerful in shifting and opening up that lens.
I think those are some very good suggestions. And resilience is a word we hear a lot these days, right? I'm wondering, how do you define it in practical terms? And what is the biggest misconception about resilience that you encounter?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so, the biggest misconception is that resilience is just this thing that we pull off the shelf when a challenge comes up. We get through the challenge and we put it back. That's a misconception. We really want to be defining resilience in a more global way, such that it's a lifestyle that we're living by integrating tools and strategies into our day to day, like some of the things we were just talking about, to optimize our own sense of well being. And it's managing our stress response, it's connecting in an authentic human way with our kids, it's understanding how our way of being impacts others and vice versa. It's engaging with people, social supports, maybe community support through networking or groups if we have a specific issue where maybe our child is struggling and some of those experiences we want to share, and that kind of support will normalize some of the experiences that come up. Maybe it's engaging in or re-engaging in a hobby that we used to love, but that's been swept away by life and life as a parent. that kind of a thing. So those are just a few examples of what we can do once we understand our own context and what we need to be optimal in that context. But those are some ideas and some suggestions that I write about in my book, and that we have research confirming that those are things that really can help bolster our well being.
Now, emotional intelligence is another catchphrase that we hear a lot about. So, talk to me about that a little bit and how parents can help their children build emotional intelligence, especially when the parents themselves feel stressed and overwhelmed. And does that look different? You said that the technique is the same. Does that look any different for parents raising a neurodivergent child, or is it really the same across the board?
Yeah, so the relaxation response technique for modulating our stress response looks the same across domains. Emotional intelligence is a very individual thing, right? It starts with understanding ourselves, understanding our kids, helping our kids to understand themselves. And depending on the child, depending on their struggles, their contexts, it might take a different angle. It might take longer to understand our child. It might take longer for our child to understand themselves, but the core principles are the same. And then understanding how our way of being impacts others out there in the world. And over time, we want to help our kids to integrate that same understanding of themselves. How are they impacting? But depending on how the child is wired, what their struggles might be, that process of building and creating emotional intelligence will definitely look different across contexts.
All right, that makes sense. Now, you've built your career around helping people thrive in their own unique context, as you've mentioned. I want to get a little personal now. What does thriving look like to you personally right now?
So right now, it looks like striking a balance between my work and the professional side of my life and my family life in a way that creates a bit more time and space for me to focus on optimal well-being, because there have certainly been times where, when my kids were younger, when I was at a different point in my career, that it was all work all the time. And I've definitely recognized, obviously through working with others as well as taking a step back and understanding myself more fully, that space is so vital. So that's really what optimization looks like for me. It's also about giving back to others in a way that doesn't relate directly to my work. For example, the thing that I do now that I really love and it adds a dimension to my life that's very meaningful is I volunteer out at Seattle Children's Hospital with my dog Wally. And that's something I'd always wanted to do. I've done a lot of training and work in pediatric medical settings, and I would see therapy dogs from time to time. I was like, oh, I want to do that someday. And so I'm doing that now. And Wally is a great dog for everything, but particularly cool to see him lock into work mode when we walk through the hospital doors. So that's something. And then sports, fitness, all that stuff. Then, of course, my kids, they're going off to college. And so helping them get set with that, and then redefining what life will look like for my husband and I when we're empty nesters, so to speak, and whether that will create more time and space to strike that elusive balance, who knows? But that's the goal.
That makes a lot of sense to me. And that's something that a lot of us strive to do, right? Is making that space, that extra space for ourselves to just rediscover certain things that we've let go by the wayside. I like that. I like that a lot. And I think that's something I need to work on too.
100%,
Thank
and not
you.
always easy, right?
Absolutely. At this point, Kate, I want to ask you, is there anything that I haven't mentioned or that I haven't asked you that you would like to bring up to our listeners? And what do you think is the most important takeaway for our listeners from our conversation?
I don't think we said it directly, but what I would encourage folks to think about is never losing sight of the possibility on the other side of challenges. either for yourself or for your kids, because there's always possibility, regardless of the content. And if anybody would like more information, they can find me at www.katelundspeaks.com. And I also am launching a new podcast. Actually, it's just been launched, Resilient Parenting with Dr. Kate.
Sounds good. I think I'll tune in and listen as well.
Amazing. Sounds great.
All right. Thank you so much, Kate, for your time and for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
If you like what you hear, please subscribe to the podcast. You can find it on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, and other popular platforms. We'd appreciate you taking the time to leave us a review. You can also listen to the podcast on YouTube at ARP Social, where you'll find bonus content. And be sure to follow us on Facebook or Instagram to get up-to-date notifications about the latest news and episodes. If you would like more information on anything else we've covered on the Autism Resource Podcast, visit us online at autismresourceproject.org/podcast. Be sure to check out our growing website often since we are continually adding useful information and resources. I want to thank our listeners for spending part of their day with us. This is the Autism Resource Podcast, and I'm Gilda Evans, reminding you to take care of yourself and that special person in your life.